Well, good morning. Right after school started this year, Tim Burrow and Jeff Smith and I went to Kenya. We flew out on August 12th. Let me get back here. Kenya is located in eastern Africa. It borders the Indian Ocean on the coast. The equator runs right through the middle of it. Kenya is surrounded by Somalia, Ethiopia, Sudan, Uganda, and Tanzania. We flew into Nairobi, which is here. That's the capital city, 5,500 feet high. So it's over a mile high. And then Tim and I went from Nairobi down to Mombasa. We flew down. We drove up to Kilifi, and then we worked villages all along the coastal area around Kilifi. Security is pretty high in Kenya right now. You may recall hearing about some people coming from Somalia over and killing several hundred Kenyans, and I think that was a couple of years ago. Their airport burned a couple of years ago. They think that was terrorist activity. And so we went through 4 security checkpoints to get into the airport. About 83% of the people claim to be Christians. 11% hold to Islam, and 6% are others, including Hindus and other religions. This is the baobab tree that Tim labeled the Bob tree. I'll just give you a few shots of Kenya as we went through the cities and then the countryside, just to kind of give you a flavor of the country, and then we'll talk about our reason for going. You see a lot of these in the cities. These are 3-passenger, 3-wheel little buggies that they use for taxis. That may look like he has big earrings, but those are actually his earlobes that have been stretched. That's indicative of some of the tribes in Kenya. Here's a small business district along the road. You may think those are crocodiles, but in Kenya they call them crocodiles. We see a lot of corn in the country. This is very interesting. This place here called Chemist is actually a pharmacy, and they do not require a prescription. You go in, you tell them your ailment, your symptoms, and he may ask you a few questions about, are you allergic to penicillin or whatever, and then he prescribes the medicine and sells it to you. So it leaves the doctor out of that loop. Polygamy is fairly common in the villages. This man at one time had 3 wives. One of them died. Now he's down to only 2. A lot of the women, most of the women, dress in very beautiful, colorful dresses. Lots of children, delightful children, a lot of fun. This is a street scene in Mombasa with an African flair. You see the big tusk that they built over the road there. This is probably one of the largest slum areas in the world, and it's in Nairobi, the capital city. It's a beautiful city, many modern buildings, and then you turn a corner and you go into an area called Eastleigh, and it is a big slum area. And the initial work, I believe, there in Nairobi was started in that area, and I'll show you a picture of the church building there in just a moment. But hundreds, thousands of people live in that area. This is a pretty typical scene in the out in the countryside in the evenings. Women carrying water back home. Some of them walk miles carrying water. I don't think any of them have their own well system. Also in the villages, most of the cooking is done on wood-fired ovens like these. But our reason for going was to distribute solar players. And I know you've heard about these. They're an amazing instrument. It has the whole Bible on it in audio form. It has 5 World Bible School courses. Has a course by Jerry Tallman on how to become a Christian. Has all 40 sunset courses, over 320 hours of instruction, and over 2 hours of gospel singing, most of it recorded right here in chapel last year, or year before. And so our purpose for going was primarily to distribute these to faithful brethren in Nairobi as well as in the Kilifi area. We took 250 of these solar players. There were already 100 of them there that Tim Brumfield and I believe maybe 1 or 2 others took previously. And Jeff went for a week. As you know, he is working with disciple trips, and he was spying out the land to see what the opportunities might be to take a group to Nairobi. And Tim and I spent 2 weeks in Kenya doing seminars, preaching, distributing solar players. We carried these in suitcases. Each of us carried a large extra suitcase full of solar players. And so the 3 of us together took 250, and they were, we went through customs without any problem whatsoever. It was just like the Lord had paved the way for us to go through. This is the Nairobi Church of Christ. It's in the middle of Eastleigh, the slum area. It's surrounded by large, high walls with steel gates and a guard. They also have a technical school and a ministry training school associated with that work. A couple by the name of the Hackett's began this work back in the 60s, and he has since passed away, but his wife Charlotte is still there working. They are Harding graduates. The first weekend we were there, the 3 of us did seminars at the Nairobi church building, and people from all over the country came. They were celebrating their 50-year anniversary of the Church of Christ being planted in Kenya. And I think probably that work was the first or one of the first works that was started in that country. So we had a good group of people who came. We gave 250 solar players to that group, to trusted church leaders and preachers. They were very happy to receive solar players. This man is blind. Can you imagine what one of these means to him? I want to tell you a little bit about Isaac. Isaac is lame. His means of transportation is to put flip-flops on his hands. His legs are not mobile, and he crawls and kind of drags his legs along everywhere he goes. He sold a goat and some sheep to have enough money to buy a bus ticket to come 12 hours to this seminar to receive one of these. That Sunday, Tim spoke celebrating their 50-year anniversary. It was just a great celebration. This is another group that we gave solar players to in Kilifi. Not all the group was in this picture, but we distributed another 100 solar players to this group and to some others around that area. And they also were very, very happy to receive solar players. Here's a larger group in Kilifi. As I mentioned, Tim and I went to the villages and spoke. Altogether, we spoke about 17 times. A typical day was to go out to a village in the morning, and each of us would do a seminar, and then we would go to another village that afternoon and do the same thing. And so by the end of the week, we were exhausted. I'll show you just a few pictures of some of the village churches. This is one that was a very welcoming group. The building isn't much. They have a thatched roof with a little bit of protection on the sides, but not much. So you can imagine in bad weather what that must be like. One of the places we went was to this village, and we met outside on benches that they set up. It was getting dark, and it was nighttime by the time we finished, so and no lights. We were just out there sharing the gospel with them. Here's another village church building. This is pretty typical. They have a lot of their buildings have masonry walls or mud brick in many cases, and sheet metal roofs. No lighting, no air conditioning, just a cover, basically. This precious little girl was right at my feet. I was out speaking to the audience, kind of walking around, and she was standing right in front of me. And so I reached down and I picked her up. She let me pick her up, and I thought of what Jesus said, "Let the little children come unto me." And she was a precious little girl. By this time, it was toward the end of the week, we were exhausted. Tim had kind of dozed off, and he said he looked back up, and I was holding a child. He didn't know when that happened, but another village church. The translator is a man named Richard Karima, and most of the people speak Swahili, but even though their national language is English, but they understand English well, but they are comfortable in speaking Swahili. So all of our preaching was done through translators. 32 people obeyed the gospel while we were there. There were 4 groups who we baptized. 2 of them were in the Indian Ocean, and 2 were in streams. Water is not real prevalent, and so we had to travel about an hour each time to find a stream with enough water to baptize people. This is in the Indian Ocean, and both groups that we baptized in the Indian Ocean, the tide was low, and we had to go way out to get enough water deep enough to baptize them. The interesting thing about the coastline along that area is it's coral with a little bit of sand mixed in, and so we didn't have flip-flops or anything. We tried to walk out there, and man, it just cuts your feet all to pieces. But we were really, really excited about these who obeyed the gospel. Here's a scene from the one of the streams where we baptized. This brother on the right, his name is Lawrence, and just about every time we had baptisms, he was there doing them. He was involved in them. I called him John the Baptizer, but he's 70 years old, strong as an ox. He is a great brother. I really enjoyed getting to be with him. This is another group that were baptized in the Indian Ocean. Here's a closer view of them. The lady in the middle is over 70, and I'm not sure she really knew how old she was. We asked her, and either she didn't understand or she didn't know. But our new brothers and sisters in Christ. Another scene from a stream. In this particular case, we went down a steep embankment to get to the stream, and people carry water from that stream. I don't know how in the world they can carry water on their heads, climbing up that steep embankment to get out. Some observations of the church in Kenya. I noticed that especially the village churches, they need a lot of teaching. You can tell that that they are really hungry for the Word, and yet they have so much that they need to be taught. Kenya is one of the most advanced nations in Africa. The Kenyan people have a lot of national pride. They are very receptive, and there's certainly a lot of work to do there. And so I hope that you will, those of you who have hearts for mission work, I hope that you'll consider Kenya. They're great people. They are very receptive. They have a lot of care for the Lord, most of them, and they just need to hear. They need to hear the gospel. So it was a great privilege to go and to be with the folks in Kenya. So Ron, I'll turn it back over to you.